An inter-ministerial committee and trucking sector have agreed on an action plan aimed at averting the blockage of major roads by local truck drivers. The Minister of Transport met with stakeholders of the trucking industry following last week's disruption on the N3 highway in KwaZulu-Natal. We're joined now by the Road Freight Association Chief Executive Officer Gavin Kelly. Gavin, good evening to you. Thanks for your time tonight. Well, what is it about the agreement this time around that gives you, as an industry, hope that things will be different to what perhaps has been seen in previous years, where there have been strikes, blockages, meetings with government and agreements coming to naught?
Well, I think the most important thing is that there is a definite implementation plan that has the steps of who's going to do what, when it's got to be done, and how it's going to be done. That's important. We haven't had those sort of concrete things down on paper before. We've had very much a sort of a general direction. And secondly, then there are very definite areas of who's going to be held accountable for what. And you would have heard the ministers earlier on today accepting accountability for what their departments or specific actions may be. So there seems to be this time around a serious attempt to address what the causes are, and I think that if we keep one another accountable and we push, that hopefully we'll get there.
Gavin, let's talk about perhaps some of the key agreements that have been reached this time around that you believe speak directly to the concerns that have been raised, particularly by local drivers.
Well, I think there's really two that are vitally important. The first is that there's broad consensus agreement that those employers who don't want to play by the rules must be dealt with. Now, that for some might be uncomfortable, and for others it might seem to be something quite easy to do, but that is a very, very, very important part of this process, because over the last number of years, there have been those who've chosen to do as they deem fit and not to meet the various bits of legislation, and whether that had to do with employing foreign individuals or how things were run or whatever the case may be, they operated or did as they liked. They operated with impunity. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that those departments who are responsible for ensuring that the various bits of checks and balances are in place and can put them in place and see that they are done, have now agreed to do as such, and then to report back on that on a far more frequent basis than they have been done or have been doing, and also to make sure that those departments that need to do that work are actually properly staffed, because out of all of these discussions has also come the realization that we don't exactly have the resources to do what we need to do.
One of the demands that was put forward by those who were protesting and, some of the organizations that represent them is that the work of truck drivers should be reserved, especially for South Africans, and where it is considered a scarce skill, that should be reviewed. What has been the consensus coming out of this meeting?
All right, I think the first thing to put on the table and really to wipe any sort of confusion off the table is that a truck driver is not a scarce skill. Not in any way. It hasn't been published as such, and the Minister of Labour made it very clear that that wasn't one of the job categories or job descriptions in the recent publication or in the last publication of scarce skills and those sorts of skills that needed to be imported into South Africa. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we need to make sure that those who can perform that skill are, in actual fact, meet the basic requirements, and those might be professional driving permits, they might be any sort of skills that might relate to a type of cargo. But that isn't a specialized skill. That is something that can be either learned on the job or actually can be trained, so you can go for those sorts of courses. Then finally, of course, the thing that's lying behind all of this is that the South African citizen must be given the opportunity to apply for those jobs, and there are a number of those jobs available, and they should get first bite at that apple.
Gavin Kelly, let's leave it there for tonight.